evening and welcome to Inspirational Voices. My name is Simone Lynch Smith, and I am here again with you all to talk about some inspiring stories that are in the Bible. And I look forward to every Monday at 6 p.m. I'm a little late this evening at 6:03, so I apologize to you all. And we come today, and we're going to talk about Esther. We're in the book of Esther today. You know, the Lord had me. I'll be honest with you. I was a little bit. I was a little bit. What's the word I'm trying to find? I was a little bit apprehensive to come on this evening because I don't know why. So since I didn't know why, I figured I have no excuse. And what are excuses good for? So for me, even if I just read through the book of Esther, um, I think I would be happy with just doing that. And I pray that if you have any questions or if you have any comments, please feel free to jot them down on the comment section, and I will be free. We can chit chat. Again, I'm coming from the book of Esther in the Bible. I normally read from the King James version, so if you have another version, I truly enjoy the King James, even though it's the, but I get a lot from the King James. Find that this is the most closest to the original uh, that was written, that was translated. So that's why I stick to the King James version. Anyways, let us begin. Um, we will start. I'll probably read through the first two or three chapters because of the fact that the you can get the background of where the story actually starts to unfold, what happens as the story starts to unfold. So here we go. And again, forgive me for mispronouncing the words. So the book of Esther in chapter 1, verse 1. Now it came to pass in the days of Ashura, Ah- Ahasuerus. This is Ahasuerus, which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia over 170 and 20 provinces. Hi, Camille. Great to have you on. Hopefully, you are blessed by this word this evening. We are in the book of Esther. We're on chapter 1, verse 2. That in those days, when the king Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan the palace, in the third year of his reign, he made a feast unto all his princes and his servants, and the power of Persia and Media, the nobles and the princes of the province being before him. When he shewed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty many days, even 140 score days. And when these days were expired, the king made a feast unto all the people that were present in Shushan, the palace, both unto great and small, 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace. So he was having a feast for many, many days, 140 days actually, where were white, green, and blue hangings, fastening with cords of fine linen and purple to silver rings and pillars of marble. The beds were of gold and silver, upon a pavement of red and blue and white and black marble. And they gave them drink in vessels of gold, the vessels being diverse one from another, and royal wine in abundance, according to the state of the king. As we have others coming on, I am in the book of Esther, and we're in chapter 1. Now we are in verse, I'll start again, 7. And they gave them drink in vessels of gold, the vessels being diverse one from another, and royal wine in abundance, according to the state of the king. And the drinking was according to the law. None did compel, For so the king had appointed to all the officers of his house that they should do according to every man's pleasure. Also, Vashti, the queen, made a feast for the women in the royal house which belonged to King Ahasuerus. Ahasuerus. Queen, on verse 10. On the seventh day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Beztha, Habona, Bigtha, and Abagtha, Zetha, and Carcass, the seven chamberlains that served in the presence of Ahasuerus the king. Hi, Tyrone. Hope all is well. We are in the book of Esther, now on verse 11. To bring Vashti, so now the king is requesting the presence of Vashti, the queen, before the king with the royal crown, to shew the people, the princes, her beauty, and the princes, her beauty, for she was fair to look upon. So here's a husband, the king, who is very proud of his queen Vashti. So he wanted her to come with her crown and all her glamour to show her off. But the queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment by his chamberlains. Therefore was the king very wroth, and his anger burned in him. She refused him. I'm not coming. He wants to just show me off. No. I'm not coming. Then the king said to the wise men which knew the times, for so was the king's manner towards all that knew law and judgment. And the next unto him was Karshina, Shetha, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marcina, and Mumkan, the seven princes of Persia and Media, which saw the king's face and which sat the first in the kingdom. What shall we do unto the queen Vashti, according to the law? Because she had not performed the commandment of the king Ahasuerus by the chamberlains. And Memucan answered before the king and the princes, Vashti the queen had not done wrong to the king only, but also to all the princes and to all the people that are in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus. And this deed of the queen shall come about unto all women. So now they're starting to talk. Okay, the queen is doing this to the king. Hi, Francine, welcome. The queen is doing this to the king, so that they shall despise their husbands, verse 17, in their eyes when it shall be reported. The king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti, the queen, to be brought in before him, but she came not. Likewise shall the ladies of Persia and Media say this day unto all the king's princes which have heard of the deed of the queen. Thus shall there arise too much contempt and wrath. So they were saying, basically, if Queen Vashti did this to the king, what would the other princesses do to the other prince? And what would the women of the countries or of the area do with their husbands? This is not a good thing. If it please the king, verse 19, let there go a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, that it be not altered, that Vashti come no more before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she. So basically, they have come to the conclusion that, you know what? She doesn't want to come before the king. She's going to lose everything, and somebody better than her will get it. And when the king's decree, which he shall make, shall be published throughout all his empire, for it is great, all the wives shall give to their husbands honor, both to great and small. So because of this decree that this king is going to make, because of what his wife did to him, all the wives in the towns are now going to honor their husbands because of this decree. And the saying pleased the king and the princes. And the king did according to the word of Memucan. For he sent letters into all the king's provinces, into every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language, that every man should bear rule in his own house, and that it should be published according to the language of every people. So they didn't care if you spoke Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese. They were writing it in your language so you would know how to treat your husband. And your husband will know how his wife should treat him. When he calls for her, she should come. Especially, it's a party. Who doesn't want to get dressed up and look lovely for their husband, right? He wanted to show off his wife. Chapter 2. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what was decreed against her. Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, let there be fair young virgins sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of the woman, unto the custody of Hegi, the king's chamberlain, keeper of the woman, and let their things for purification be given them. And let the maiden which pleaseth the king be queen instead of Vashti. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. Hey, who doesn't want a new wife, right? A lot of virgins too. He got all the young virgins he can choose from. And little dear Vashti is out of the picture. Now in Shushan, the palace, there was a certain Jew, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, whom has been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, that was Esther's name, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. She was an orphan. And the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took her for his own. So her uncle took her in. Hi, Tony. Welcome on. We're reading Esther, and we are in chapter 2, and we are in verse 8. Welcome aboard. So it came to pass when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan, the palace, to the custody of Haggai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house, to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the woman. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her her things for purification, which such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens which were meet to be given her out of the king's house. And he preferred her and her maids unto the best place of the house of the woman. So she got the best of everything when she came into the palace. The person in charge of the women loved her, so she had favor amongst everyone there. Esther had not shewed her people nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she should not shew it. And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the woman's house to know how Esther did and what should become of her. So no one knew that Esther was a Jew, and no one really knew about Esther per se. Tyrone, the Bible I'm reading from is a King James. I don't know if you can see it. Holy Bible, King James Version. Okay, and we are in Esther, the book of Esther. And the book of Esther has 9 chapters, and it is right before Job. So here we go. Verse 12 of chapter 9. Now, when every maid's turn was come to go into King Assuerus, after that she had been 12 months, according to the manner of the women. So were the days of their purification accomplished, to wit, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with sweet odors, and with other things for the purification of the woman. So for 12 months, you get to be soaked in myrrh and sweet, savory scents for a year. Isn't that lovely? So I guess your skin will just be permeating with perfume as you walk by, or someone, just smells you. You smell delightful to the king. Verse 13. Then thus came every maiden unto the king. Whatsoever she desired was given her to go with her out of the house of the woman unto the king's house. Verse 14. In the evening she went, and on the morrow she returned unto the second house of the woman, to the custody of, what a word, Shaashgaz, the king's chamberlain, which kept the concubines. She came in unto the king no more, except the king delighted in her, and that she were called by name. So now when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go in unto the king, she required nothing but with Haggai, the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the woman appointed. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her. So Esther was taken unto King Ahasuerus into his house royal in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. So here it is, Esther becomes queen, the favor of God. Then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast. And he made a release to the provinces and gave gifts according to the state of the king. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Esther had not yet shewed her kindred nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him. So basically, Mordecai was like a father figure to her. So everything he told her, she did. And he told her, don't tell them who you are yet, Esther. Don't tell them. And she had not told them who she was or what her kindred, what her background is. Verse 21. In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, 2 of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those which kept the door, were wroth, and sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. So 2 of his guards were not too happy with him, the king, and they wanted to kill him. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther, the queen. And Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. And when inquisition, which means that she told the king that Mordecai told her. And when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore, they were both hung or hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king. So when Mordecai told Esther to tell the king these 2 people were trying to kill him, um, they asked questions, brought it before, I guess, a court of law, if you want to say, and they were found guilty and they were hanged. Chapter 3. After these things did King Ahasuerus, I'll get it probably by the end of the story, promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. So now Haman became the right-hand man of the king. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. Then the king's servants, which were in the king's gate, said unto Mordecai, Why transgressest thou the king's commandment? Now it came to pass, when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman, to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. So as Jews go, they do not bow to anyone besides God. So therefore, Mordecai was not going to bow to a man per se. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. So that made him angry. Who is this man standing at the gate, not even bowing at me? And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had shewed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. Verse 7. In the first month, that is, the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur meaning lot. That is the lot, sorry, before Haman from day to day and from month to month to the 12th month, that is the month Adar. And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed amongst the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people. Neither keep they the king's laws, therefore is not for the king's profit to suffer them. Isn't that funny? So because they don't walk the same way that Haman or the king wants them to walk, they do not profit the king. So therefore, why should they be around? Isn't that something to think about? If your services are not required, if you don't follow the rules laid out by the land, then you're subjected to be cast out because you don't agree. Your religion, let's just say, doesn't agree with what they're doing. Your thought, what you believe in doesn't agree with them. So therefore, you profit them not, so they don't need you. Happens at the job, it happens in a country, it happens a lot of places when you bring it to this era. Okay? So verse 9, so Haman now says, If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business to bring it into the king's treasuries. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. Now he became the enemy of the Jews, because he wanted them killed, because they would not bow to him. And the king said unto Haman, The silver is given to thee, the people also to do with them as it seemed good to thee. Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants and to the governors that were over every province and to the rulers of every people of every province, according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language. So just like before, how he wrote that law for the women to honor their husband in every language. Now he's writing a law that every Jew should be killed and destroyed. And the letters were sent by post into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take the spoil of them for prey. So basically, whatever they have after you kill them is yours. You can take it. The copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day. The post went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Shushan, the palace. And the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city, Shushan, was perplexed. Chapter 4. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud and bitter cry, and came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. How dare you come into the king's, majesty, the beautiful palace with sackcloth, right? When you're going into the prince house or palace, you have to dress appropriately. And in every province, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting and weeping and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. Verse 4. So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told it her. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai and to take away his sackcloth from him, but he received it not. So the queen, Esther, sent clothing for him to change, get out of his sackcloth, but he said, no, I'm not changing my clothes. Then called Esther for Hathach, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. So Hathach went forth to Mordecai unto the street of the city, which was before the king's gate. And Mordecai told him of all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of the money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasuries for the Jews to destroy them. Also, he gave him the copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to shew it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king to make supplication unto him, and to make requests before him for her people. Okay, so here's Esther. She is the queen. Her uncle is now giving her a commandment that she needs to go before the king and tell him these are her people. So remember, for the past probably over 7 years, Esther has hid who she was from the king and all the people. So now all of a sudden they're going to die. And Mordecai is saying to her, you need to go into the king and talk to the king. So verse 10 says, again, Esther spoke unto Hathach and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants and all the people of the king's province do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death. It doesn't matter who you are. You can be the queen. If the king didn't call you, you can't go before him, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. And they told to Mordecai Esther's word. So Esther has not been called to the king's chambers or to go before him for 30 days. And basically, she's in a conundrum right now, because if she was to step in front of the king, go before him, she can die. So, how many of us had this happen to us? Not exactly like this, but knowing that you have to go before your boss, or knowing that you have to go before your parents, or knowing that you have to go before someone and tell them something, and you feel that they're going to kill you, right? That it's so hard to do, and you feel like it's death. It's going to come upon you if you have to do this thing. So, verse 13, then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. So basically, for her, he's saying, listen, not because you're the queen, you think you're going to get away with this, because you're also a Jew. And Haman don't care who you are. And because it's the king's decree, it doesn't matter. It's set in stone. His words does not go fall by the wayside. It's going to happen. So you're a part of this. So don't think you're better than us, Queen Esther. So verse 14 says, for if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall there enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place, but thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? So he basically said to her, listen, Esther, Hadash, her other name, her Hebrew name. Listen, Esther, listen. If you don't talk about it now, all of us are going to be dead, including your kindred family. But God is going to rise up somebody else, somewhere else, that's going to get the, not glory, because God gets the glory for it all, but that's going to get the acknowledgement of they were the one who saved the Jewish people in this time. And who knows? The reason why you're queen, Esther, it's probably because of this. That's the reason why God has placed you there, because he knew that these things were going to come to pass. And therefore, he put you in the position where you can change it. So, some of us look at ourselves and say, why are we here? We're only this, we're only that. Or, why are we here? We are this and we are that. We don't need to help those. And the reason why you are there is to help those like yourself, whatever position you are in, because God has placed you there for a purpose and for a reason. So verse 15 goes on to say, then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer: go, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. If I perish, I perish. So she came to realize, you know what, that is true. And who knows, she probably said a prayer, she probably talked to the Lord, and she realized that this is something that she needed to do, not only for herself, but for her people. And she came to the conclusion that if I'm going to be fired, if I'm going to be kicked out, if I'm going to be whatever, it's for the good of all people, not just for myself, but for my people. And then, something will become of this. So, you know, let's pray, let's fast, let's go before God and pray for me that I will not die, but at least I know I'm going ahead with it. And if I die for a good cause. Verse 17. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Chapter 5. Now it came to pass on the third day that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house, over against the king's house, and the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house, over against the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight. Look at God. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. Verse 3. Then said the king unto her, What wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall be given thee to the half of the kingdom. Ha! Look at that. He not only held out the scepter for her to touch, but he also said, Ask me anything, and I will give you up to half the kingdom. Okay? Okay. Yes, Miss Sharman. If I perish, I perish, but I'm going to see the king. Amen. 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 So, yes. So, and Esther answered, If it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. See, a true woman knows how to get to a man, even a king, through his stomach. Let's eat some food and drink some wine. Okay. Then the king said, Cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther had said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition? Now he's like, oh my goodness, what all of this? What is it, my queen? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed. He is willing to do anything for his queen. Hey, she had a banquet just for him and his second-hand man, or first-hand man, whichever one. Then answered Esther and said, My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king had said. Then went Haman forth that day joyful. Haman is happy and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Mordecai's happy, and then all of a sudden he sees somebody not bending to him. Kind of ticked him off a little bit. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh, his wife, Zeresh. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches and the multitude of his children and all the things wherein the king had promoted him and how he had advanced him above the princes and the servants of the king. He was showing off. Haman said, Moreover, yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared but myself. So he's like, listen, I'm the king and the queen. We're going to have a banquet and have some fun, eat some food, drink some wine. And tomorrow I am invited unto her also with the king. So 2 banquets. Guess what? 2 banquets I get to go with the king and the queen. Who did that? Verse 13. Yet all that this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. So guess what? He was not going to be happy until he saw Mordecai dead. It didn't matter who he went with. Yes, he could show off about it. But you know what? This person who's not bowing to me, who's not doing what I want him to do, him and his people, they're going to die. 14. Then said Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends unto him, let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. So now his wife told him, you know what, Haman? Before you even go to the banquet, why don't you just kill him? Just make a gallows so he can hang from it, so you won't have to worry about him not bowing to you anymore. But let's see what chapter 6 says. On that night could not the king sleep. How many of us have problems sleeping sometimes? And he commanded to bring the book of records of the chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teres, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the king said, what honor and dignity had done to Mordecai for this? So the king wanted to know, what did we do for Mordecai? Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, there is nothing done for him, actually. Verse 4, and the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's servant said unto him, behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, let him come in. Yeah, let him come in, please. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, what shall be done unto the man whom the king delighted to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, to whom would the king delight to do honor more than to myself? Me? The king would like to honor me? And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delighted to honor, let the royal apparel be brought which the king useth to wear, and the horse that the king rideth upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. And let this apparel and the horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man withal, whom the king delighted to honor, and bring him on horseback back through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighted to honor. Because that's what I want. I want to wear your clothes, ride on your horse, have your crown on my head. Haman wants that. So yes, that's what you should do for the man you want to honor. Then the king said to Haman, make haste and take the apparel and the horse, and as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew, that sitteth at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. Wow. When you're so self-absorbed, first of all, he didn't even ask, who's this man? Which he could have asked, because he wanted to come and talk to the king about killing him, right? So he didn't ask, so he just assumed it was him, which is good, because you know what? Do unto others as you would have done unto yourself, right? So therefore, whether you don't like him or not, he got what you wanted. So, verse 11. Then took Haman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaimed before him, thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delighted to honor. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate, But Haman hasted to his house mourning and having his head covered, because he spoke such bad things about Mordecai that he was embarrassed to even be seen with him, yet still having him with the king's clothes and on the king's horse, parading around the city. And Haman told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh, his wife, unto him, If Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but shalt surely fall before him. And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains and hasted to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared. So, you heard what his wife said, right? That's why us as wives need to speak good things to our husband, because we never know what can happen when we speak ill things about our husbands. And we also should, encourage them to do what's right versus doing what's wrong. Chapter 7. So the king and Haman came to banquet with Esther and the queen. And the king said again unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, wine, food, have him feeling really good. What is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to the half of the kingdom. Now, this is the third time this king has said that. So he is sure he wants to give her half the kingdom. What do you want, Esther? Verse 3. Then Esther the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. And if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Queen Esther the queen, Who is he and where is he that doth presume in his heart to do so? Who did this? Why would he do that? And Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. I guess he's not so happy to just be the single man with the king and the queen at the banquet anymore, huh? And the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden, and Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther, the queen. For he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. So here is Haman now looking at the king, and now is asking Esther, Esther, please, please, please. The king wants to do me some wrong. Please. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was. So Esther's there probably fanning herself, just waiting for the king to come back to hear what he has to say. And here is Haman laying next to her, begging her for her to say something to save his life. But guess what? The king walked in and it didn't look like that. So then the king said, then said the king, will he force the queen also before me in the house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Okay, so the king thought, oh my God, this man now wants my wife. Is this crazy? Well, he wants her to beg. He wants to beg to her that he is saved. And Habana, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him thereon. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's wrath pacified. So the same trap they set for you and I, they will fall in it themselves. That's usually how it goes, right? Let God be with us. Let God be for us. Let's stand on his side of the gate. Amen. So if God be for us, who can be against us? And God was basically for Esther and her people. Verse 8. Yes, very deep. And Tyrone, yes, turnabout is fair play. Chapter 8. On that day did the king Ahasuerus gave the house of Haman the Jews' enemy unto Esther the queen. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was unto her. So she finally told the king who Mordecai was. This is my uncle. This is my father. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. And Esther spake yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet, and besought him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his device that he had devised against the Jews. Because remember, they still had that decree that was going to happen on the 13th day of the 12th month. Then the king held out the golden scepter towards Esther. So Esther rose and stood before the king and said, if it please the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seem right before the king, and I be pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews, which are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that shall come unto my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? Then the king Ahasuerus said unto Esther the queen and to Mordecai the Jew, behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hung upon the gallows, because he laid his hand upon the Jews. Write ye also for the Jews as it liketh you in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring. For the writing which is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's ring may no man reverse. Then were the king's scribes called at that time in the 3rd month, that is the month Sivan, on the 23rd day thereof. And it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews, and to the lieutenants, and to the deputies and rulers of the provinces which are from India unto Ethiopia, and 127 provinces, unto each province according to the writing thereof, and unto every people after their language, and to the Jews according to their writing and according to their language. So everyone from English, Spanish, Latin, French, Portuguese, everyone knew. And I'm not saying that's what their languages were, but you know what I mean. Everyone knew. It was written in every language for them. And he wrote in the king's Ahasuerus' name and sealed it with the king's ring, and sent letters by post on horseback, and riders on mules and camels and young dromedaries. And by the way, the king used to seal stuff because I believe the king couldn't write, nor could he read. That's why he always called somebody to read for him or write for him, and his seal was his signature. Verse 11. Wherein the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together and to stand for their life. Stand up for your life. To destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people and province that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. So now the opposite was given. Well, the same was given to the Jews now. They can kill everybody and take their spoils for prey. Upon one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. The copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, and that the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. So that post that rode upon mules and camels went out, being hastened and pressed on by the king's commandment, and the decree was given at Shushan the palace. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. And in every province and in every city, whatsoever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them. And it really, God gave them favor. God gave the Jews favor. So now, as like with, the stories that we've heard before, God was with them. So people feared them because God was with them. Chapter 9. Now, in the 12th month, that is, the month Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in execution, in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had rule over them that hated them. So now it turned around. The Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus to lay hand on such as sought their hurt. And no man could withstand them, for the fear of them fell upon the people. When you know that the Almighty is behind you, you get a boldness, you get fearless. So when someone sees someone who is confident and sure, that puts fear in people. So, and all the rulers of the provinces and the lieutenants and the deputies and the officers of the king helped the Jews because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them, because Mordecai now was the second in command. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went out throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. And in Shushan, the palace, the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men. And Pashahandata, and Dalphon, and Aspatha, and Paratha, and Adelia, and Adridata. Hopefully I'm saying those names correct. Sorry if I'm not. And Parasmatha, and Arisai, and Arida, and Vajezata. The 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, slew they, but on the spoil laid they not their hands. So they didn't take anything. They just wanted to make sure that they were dead and they were not going to be killed. The Jews were not going to be killed. On that day, the number of those that were slain in Shushan, the place was brought before the king. And the king said unto Esther, the queen, the Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan, the palace, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now, what is thy petition, and it shall be granted thee? Or what is thy request further, and it shall be done? Then said Esther, verse 13, if it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow also according unto this day's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows. And the king commanded it so to be done. And the decree was given at Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. For the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day also of the month Adar, and slew 300 men in Shushan, but on the prey they held not their hand. But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes 75,000. But they laid not their hands on the prey. On the 13th day of the month Adar, and on the 14th day of the same, rested they, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. And I believe the reason why Esther wanted her son to be hung is because that's what he had plans for. He had plans to hang Esther, kindred. Well, he didn't know Esther was a Jew, but to have her family be hung on that same gallows. And that stood as an example of what can happen to people when they try to not only go against God's people, but do it in such a way where they did nothing to them to cause such. The man didn't want to bow. That was his choice. He didn't have to bow because that was not his religion. He loved God, and that's who he wanted to bow to. He didn't want to bow to a man, and that was his choice. Verse 18, but the Jews that were at Shushan assembled together on the 13th day thereof, and on the 14th thereof, and on the 15th day of the same they rested, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the villages that dwelt in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and a good day, and of sending portions one to another. And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters unto all the Jews that were in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, both near and far, to establish this among them, that they should keep the 14th day of the month Adar, and the 15th day of the same yearly, as the days wherein the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning into a good day. And they should make them days of feasting and joy, and of sending portions one to another, and gifts to the poor. And the Jews undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written unto them. Exactly, Tyrone, just like the 3 Hebrew boys that did not bow and was put in the furnace, and they lived. They came out. They did not smell like smoke, did not smell like they were in the fire at all, right? Because God was with them. Verse 23, and the Jews undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written unto them, because Haman the son of Hammedat, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had devised against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast Pur, that is, the lot, to consume them and to destroy them. And when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked device, which he devised against the Jews, should return upon his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Wherefore they call these days Purim, after the name Pur. Therefore, for all the words of this letter, and of that which had seen concerning this matter, and which had come unto them, the Jews ordained and took upon them, and upon their seed, and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, so as it should not fail, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writing, and according to the appointed time every year, and that these days should be remembered, that kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed. Then Esther the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew, wrote with all authority to confirm this second letter of Purim. And he sent the letters unto all the Jews to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, with words of peace and truth, to confirm these days of Purim in their times appointed, according as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had enjoined them, and as they had decreed for themselves and for their seed the matters of the fastings and their cry. And the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. And the king, chapter 10, last chapter, only three verses. And the king Ahasuerus laid a tribute upon the land and upon the isles of the sea, and all the acts of his power and his might, and the declaration of the greatness of Mordecai, unto whereunto the king advanced him, are they not written in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was next unto King Ahasuerus, and great among the Jews, and accepted of the multitude of his brethren, seeking the wealth of his people, and speaking peace to all his seed. So sometimes I think, with this story, you get where we're in positions for a reason. We're placed in positions to not just to help ourselves, but to also help others. And you don't have to be in, the nursing field or doctor or, healthcare worker to help others. You can be in any field and help someone. And, once you're God gives us positions and authority in what we do in order to use it and use it for the good. Use it for the good of his people, which we are his people. They talked about the Jews there, but that's just an example of how we should treat every single person, as we would like them to treat us, how we want to be treated. As Haman, said he wants the king's garment and his horse and his crown. That's what we want for ourselves. Then we should also want it for others, despite of how they may look, despite of how we may feel. And the moral of the story is, if God's for us, who can be against us? Especially you pray, you fast, you seek the face of God, and he knows your heart, and you do it with all your might, and you also do it with a good heart. So I hope you enjoyed the story of Esther and how she actually helped her people in the time she was required to, because she rose from nothing into something, into a queen. And God placed her there for his people. So good night. Thank you for joining me on Inspirational Voices. And I pray that we can meet up again here next week, same time, 6 p.m. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to email me, or feel free to WhatsApp me, and or feel free to leave a message here and I'll get back to you. So thank you. And thank you, Ms. Shaman. I truly appreciate you enjoying this very inspirational story, knowing that you are a Queen Esther, and we all are Queen Esthers, or King Esther, King or Mordecai, so just, look at yourself as, why am I here? It's not just for me, but for others as well. And may God continue to bless you. May he continue to shine his face upon you. And may you go in peace. Much love. God bless. And Camille, I see this. You're very, very welcome. And I'm happy that it spoke to you. Only God. God bless.